Hello and welcome to WestMusings, 10-minute museum talks here at the Western Museums Association 2014 meeting at the Springs Preserve. We're grateful to the Springs Preserve for hosting us here, also for the sponsor of WestMusings, Wells Fargo, as well as Soulstream Media, our post-production sponsor. Visit them on soulstream.net. Our first speaker this afternoon, Sven Haakanson. Sven, as many of you may know, MacArthur Grant Genius Award winner, most especially is proud as a father, as an artist, a carver, a photographer, and today he will be telling us about the things that matter most to him. Sven, thank you.
Jemai, thank you for inviting me to speak here, and thank you, West Museums, WMA, for inviting me. I'm going to be talking about repatriating knowledge and inspiring change. I've had the privilege to work in museums for over 20 years, and in that time I've learned a tremendous amount. But I want to share with you one story, one part of my journey of learning who I am, about my history, about our history. Growing up, we were Aleuts, Eskimos were up north, cowboys and Indians, you had Tlingit, but that's it. Over the years, I've always wondered who and where we come from, but never really thought about it. We were taught and told not to think about the past. That was the past, forget about it. Well, in my sophomore year, I had the privilege to go over to Denmark to attend a conference in Copenhagen. And in that conference, I listened to a lecture put on by Dr. Lydia Black. And after her lecture, I sat down with her for over 3 hours, and we talked about Aleut history. I was asking her questions about the art, what she had learned, where she learned it from. From there, my entire life changed. From there, I went on to get a PhD in anthropology. But more importantly, I started to see more of what we had in our collections, or in collections in museums. But let's step back. When is the first documented history for Kodiak, or for my people, the Sugbiet? Here you've got Cook in 1778 coming to Alaska. This is some of the first written documentations of Sugbiet contact. He went into the Prince William Sound, and what's more important, especially if you do research with any of this, look at Cook's officers' journals. They're a little bit more honest about what they see. When they were in Prince William Sound, they talked about open boats, onyaks is what we call them, sea otter skin furs, weapons to defend themselves. Well, they sail down past Kodiak, and they actually name a couple of places along the way. They get down to Alaska, there's no more open boats, no more sea otter skins, no more weapons to defend themselves. 6 years later, the same thing happens in Kodiak. But more importantly, as you start to look at the drawings, you start to look at all this amazing history. We can look at the negative stuff, oh, look at Captain Cook brought all this stuff, but what about the positive things that are in there? How can we utilize that knowledge? One of the things I noticed, especially with Captain Cook's drawings, or Weber's drawings, is these open boats. We don't have open boats on Kodiak. Where did they come from? Well, as I started to do more research and looking in museums, you have these open boats here with this bulbous bow from Weber. But then in the Russian historical drawings, you don't have any open boats. After the 1830s, 1840s, there's no reference to these boats being used. So this knowledge is literally erased from our living memory. But you have it in the historical accounts. I was showing a friend these pictures of these boats, and he's like, wow, that's really cool. I'm like, well, what's cool about this? If you look at the bulbous bow here, and that bulbous bow there, He's like, I just had one of these put on my boat because they decreased the fuel consumption and increased the speed of the boat. And here I'm sitting there looking at this, is like, we've had this for 1,000 years. I come back to the reference, why are we, I was told we're stupid. Yet you have something that's so simple, that's technologically advanced. How can I get that knowledge into our children's minds, into our community's minds? How do we share that knowledge? Where are these pieces? They're museum collections, and we are repositories of objects. But we are repositories of knowledge. To me, every one of these pieces embody a history that's unwritten but written right in front of us. The boat is just one example of how much information we have, even though it's forgotten. Well, how can we bring that knowledge back home? I have the privilege to work at the Burke Museum as a curator and associate professor at UW, and I've been there for a year. They have one of 12 remaining models that exist in the world in their collection. So during my time at the museum, the month of July, I sketched it out, diagram, blew it apart in my mind, and then blew it apart on paper, and then made kits to work with one of the villages on Kodiak, the village of Akiak. But I photographed it in detail, trying to understand the dynamics of it. There's no glue or no nails on these boats. Created the kits, so then when I'm working with the students, they'd be able to think about how this boat was made. And we can also relearn that knowledge that's embodied in that piece. To traveling out to one of the rural villages, the village of Akiak. And this is also another wonderful thing. One of the elders has always wanted to build an open boat because he was up in Barrow, and he's like, well, why don't we have open boats? And he's been dreaming about this since 1994. Working with him in the community of Akiak, in a camp condition, no electronics, which is wonderful, no glue, no nails. We sat down, and each of these boys spent over, I would say, 60 hours making these boats in that time. What was more important for me, and more important for them, was I was teaching them how to be engineers. I was showing them the amazing ingenuity of my ancestors, their ancestors, our ancestors, that's embodied in these pieces that literally has been wiped away since the 1840s. Very quick week, but we built 5 models with these young men. We ended up building 13 models. No glue, no nails. All traditional, all tied by hand. To me, these pieces here, something like a simple boat that was erased from our memories to put it back into a living memory. All of our museums have these pieces, and we have the power to repatriate that knowledge. And I bet you every one of you can find that in all your collections. And that's why I love museums. That's why I love working in museums, because we carry written histories for a lot of indigenous communities across our country. But I thank you for your time.